Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at Pacific's Aurora trading cards for football for 1998, 1999, and 2000. Pacific in the mid-90s was a really fascinating company because they really loved exploring not just how to make better cards, but exploring different ways of making cards, period, the different ways of thinking about cards. They did folded cards, they did prismatic cards, they did cards that were die cut, cards with inset lenses made of acetate. They made cards that were oversized. It was crazy the different ideas they were coming up with, and they were constantly playing around with new things. But it meant that they had a lot of sets that appeared for a little while and then were gone, appeared for a little while and then they were gone. And that was just kind of how they operated. And by the late 1990s, they decided to scale it back and focus on making just some good cards that could be sold year in and year out. And so they developed 3 sets to join their Pacific, their Crown Royale, and their by then 1-year-old Revolution sets. And the 3 sets were Aurora, Omega, and Paramount. Aurora could be considered the most unique of all of these 3 sets because while Omega was also done without any parallels, the distinction about Aurora was that these were designed to be kind of a high-level card. They were made a little bit thicker. They were similar to Revolution, but these cards were intended to stand alone as single cards that really kind of carried themselves as higher-end cards. And this was kind of an odd thing that they did, not in terms of intent, but in terms of how they approached it. So the cards themselves are very colorful affairs, and the borders are really cool. It's a color fade between 2 team colors, and the 2 borders join together at one of the colors. There is a big triangle with a picture in it that you're totally forgiven if you've never noticed it. I'm always surprised every time I discover it myself because it just kind of blends in because the pictures are just so busy. And so the part of the card that stands out is the border. The borders look great, but it's the only thing that you can see in these cards. Now the rookies are a little bit better because the photos were taken during practice. And so in practice you can actually see the player silhouetted a little bit better. But these cards just kind of run together with all the stuff that they have on it. And so none of the cards actually hold up as individual cards in your mind. You never really notice them. On the card backs, they look more like just one of these interesting Pacific cards, which is fine. It's okay, but the cards were not able to do what they needed to do, which was to be more like Topps Gold Label. They were far, far, far from that. And just like Omega, they had no parallels. This card was supposed to stand only on its own, and so they relied on all the inserts to really carry this card. And there were quite a few inserts. The first one was Command, and this is an extremely colorful card. It's a big football, it's got some colors around it, really looks nice. Oh yeah, there's a player in it somewhere. The player doesn't really stand out, but that's okay because the card itself is really dynamic and really fun to look at. That's really kind of what this card is. And then they have Face Mask. This is a card that it's really high gloss, it's fully die cut, I mean all the way around, and it's die cut like a helmet. And they have a little piece of plastic where the face mask on the helmet would be, which actually makes it kind of cool. It's a really nice looking card, and the fact that it has the plastic element in it makes it carry really well. So it's a really fun card. It's probably the highlight of all of this set in terms of just the base cards because they really do look good. Then they also have their laser cuts, and this was done the same way that how Topps had done their laser cutting. But here, unlike Topps, they kind of forgot to design the card. The card looks neat. It's got a lot of colors. It's really vibrant and bright, but it's difficult to really see the laser cutting, which is X's and O's, and the chain between the 2 yard markers. So it's an interesting idea that they really didn't do anything with it. And you don't care. I mean, this card really isn't about the laser cutting, which is kind of an interesting thing about this. But the insert set that really is of significance for 1998 Aurora was their 1 per pack Championship Fever cards. Now these are a ton of gold foil. This is kind of where they hid all of their gold foil. These cards are really thin, so they're like Omega, but the card itself is a really blocky card. It is all about the foil on either side with a kind of a slanted window for you seeing the picture. But what's really cool about these cards is that the foil is textured for the image of the particular player. Now there are 50 cards in the set, which means there are 50 different imprints on the gold foil. Every gold foil is themed for the specific card that it's on. It's a really neat trick that they did, and it's something I really like. It's something you're probably not going to notice. So it's definitely a plus. But they did parallels here with these cards. And the first parallel is red, and this gives a really nice ruby quality. I mean, these cards look fantastic. I love them. They also did a silver parallel, and these are serial numbered out of 250. So you have to turn the card over. Up at the top, there's not even like a box. It's just right there on the card. It's numbered out of 250. They also did a platinum blue version. This was serial numbered out of 100. And then they also did a copper. And this copper is a really bright orange copper. It looks really good. And these are serial numbered out of 20, so they're very rare. But this wasn't the only thing that they did for Aurora. They also did cubes. And the cubes are really kind of cool because they would show up in the boxes, and they would come in two forms. The first form that they came in was actually flat, and so this is unfolded, and it is a cube in every sense of how you would assume. 3 pictures of the player, and then on the back of the cube is all the stats. That is the first way, and it's a very common way to find it, but you also would find them coming in the cube form in plastic wrapper. So, and there's a whole set of these. But that was a really unusual thing that they did with this. These are all box toppers, but it's very distinctive, and these are very unique even for the 90s. But in order to continue this set, they were going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board. So for 1999, they still did a 150 card set, but here they totally changed the card design to be very colorful and very vibrant and very kid-like in a way. It's very bold. I mean, there's really no other word for it. It's bold. It still has the 2 images like the previous time, but here it's one big portrait, and then there's a little shot of the player behind, and then a big color pattern behind with kind of a wave feature in it. On the card back, it's extremely minimalist. There's nothing really intriguing about these cards. These are cards that you're ripping packs, not really for the cards themselves, but for chasing parallels. And the main parallel for this is their premiere date. These are serial numbered out of 77. It's the star pattern, the star foil, and then the serial number goes right inside. That's how they did these cards. And so that's really what you're chasing with these cards. Almost. But there's another parallel as well, and this is a smaller skip number set. So skip number means you're making a parallel of the main set, but you're not making all the cards. You're only making part of the cards, and you're not renumbering them. So of the 150 cards in the set, 50 cards were redone as their pinstripes. This is where you replace the background with vertical pinstripes, black and white. Otherwise, the card is basically the same. And on the card back, even though there are only 50 of them, the card numbers stay the same. So in order to get a checklist, you have to find out what all the cards are in order to know what you're collecting. It's something that always kind of bothers me because it adds a level of complexity that I think is just kind of unnecessary. If you have a clear checklist, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But if you don't have a clear checklist, then it takes a long time for us to finally work through and make sure that we know what all the cards are. So at any rate, there are 50 of these cards, and these also come with the premiere date, which means the main cards are serial numbered out of 77 on the premiere date. The premiere date for the pinstripe parallel is also serial numbered out of 77, so they're the equal amount of rareness. Which means, in essence, if you're collecting the premiere date, it's a 200 card set where 50 players have 2 different versions of a card in that 200 card set. That's kind of how it works. As far as the inserts go, they still did the Championship Fever, and this time the card was designed in a very different fashion. This time it's a lot thicker, and they didn't do all 4 parallels. They just did 3. They got rid of the ruby, and they just did the silver, the platinum, and the copper. The silver is again numbered out of 250, the platinum blue is again numbered out of 100, and the copper is again numbered out of 25. They also did a number of inserts that were unique to this set, starting off with canvas. And the canvas cards are canvas. It's a semi-gloss finish on the front, and on the back it's a fabric. It really is a fabric. And the front it's washed out. The image is washed out, which actually works really well for these canvas cards. The card back looks like an insert set for Pacific. So it works in every way, but what's really cool about these fabric cards is if you've never had the opportunity to feel one of the fabric or canvas cards that they've made, it's a really interesting experience as a card collector because they don't feel right. They feel very distinct. So that was a fun set that they did. Then they did their complete player set, and this is a set of cards that came both on hobby and in retail. These are all numbered out of $2.99, but the hobby cards are different from the retail cards. And so that means that they're $299 hobby, $299 retail. And the way that you can tell the difference is one of them has hollow gold on the front, and there's a green bar down at the bottom on the back. The other ones are hollow blue on the front, and then it's purple, I mean like completely purple, on the back. So those two are distinct. But then also these cards came serial numbered out of 25. Both versions come serial numbered out of 25. So it's basically the same card, just a different kind of serial numbering. They also did leather cards, and this is a partially die cut card where they have kind of a football theme and a patch of leather on the front, which, you know, it's kind of cool. Really thick, but kind of cool. And then they did their Styrotech cards, and these are a very thick plastic or vinyl card stock, and there's almost kind of a translucent quality to it. There's a hollowness to the card that is really neat, but what I really like about it is it's horizontally oriented with some really good design work that just really fits with the nature of this card. So this seems like a card that was perfectly designed all the way through. Now for $19.99, they had all the pieces together, but they hadn't quite refined how to really inspire an audience for the cards. They had to kind of take a next step. And the first thing that they did was they took the main cards in the set and they turned them horizontal. So you had a white border around the outside, you had the player, again, the two pictures of the player, but you had kind of an inset, well, not inset, thematically inset background hovering in the back. The whole card is just a regular card, but it looks like the background is inset back. And so it gives a three-dimensional feel to, or a three-dimensional look to these cards that's really pretty neat. Also, the way that the colors work is really good. Again, it's a 150 card set, and again, they also did these with the pinstripes. It's a skip number in the same way, so it's basically 200 cards if you do both sets, and they all came with the premiere dates as well. This time it's serial numbered out of 85, not out of 77. And the rookies, every single time the rookies show up, and this does have a Tom Brady. The Tom Brady is not in the parallel. It's not in the pinstripe parallel. He does have the premiere date parallel, just not the pinstripe parallel. And some of these cards did also come with autographs. Usually they're serial numbered out of 350, but those autographs do show up, and the big way that you can tell is right down at the Pacific logo, it says autograph. So those are also in there. And then for their Championship Fever cards, these went in a very different look. I mean, all of the insert cards here are very bold. This card just doesn't look like any of the others, but it also doesn't work the same way. Again, it starts with gold foil, but then it goes to the silver again, but this time it's numbered out of 310. Then they have the copper next, and that's actually numbered out of 160. And then the platinum blue is the rarest, this time serial numbered out of 145. So all of the parallel cards are a lot easier to get for this set than they were for the previous years, which makes it a lot easier to collect, a lot more fun to collect. For their complete players, this time they actually went with a pair of cards. So every team that's featured has two players. And when you get one card, it has half of the logo of what essentially is the middle of the two cards. It's off on the side. And then when you get the other card, it has the other half of the logo, the two go together. And so it's a two card wide design. That's really what it is. And these are really gorgeous cards. They also did their Styrotechs as kind of a mashup with the helmet cards that they'd done in 1998. So here it's the Styrotech plastic, it's that firm. They only did a partial die cutting this time of the face mask, but it doesn't look as good as the previous year, in my opinion. It's an okay card, it's too blocky. That's kind of the problem that I have with this card. Then they have Rookie Draft Board, and Rookie Draft Board is a really thick card. On the front, there's nothing special about it, especially the fact that the players are in their college uniforms doesn't really help. But when you flip it over, there's an inset cut in where you have a glossy back with the theme is a chalkboard, but it's basically a matte surface inset within, so they have a chalkboard theme of some writing about the player, which is a really interesting idea. The cards themselves they don't really carry themselves with any distinction, but the concept is pretty cool, and it would have been nice to have a 2001 set to see if they'd actually refine this approach that they had to make the cards look good. But the only other thing that they did was, at this point, Pacific was doing jersey cards for basically all the sets. And so in this case, they did a vertical orientation with a big circle for the jersey patch. And then they also had patch versions of the cards as well, serial numbered out of 10. So those are really rare. And that was basically what they ended up with for the 2000 year. Now, at this point, they were finally, it was like they were finally hitting their stride, but they kind of, Pacific was kind of on its way out, and so they didn't have the ability to make a 2001 set, which is too bad, because I think that they were really kind of getting to where they needed to be. But this is basically what they did for Aurora, and it's interesting to see the three very distinct years. These are cards that you don't run into very often, but when you do, they're really confusing. So I wanted to make sure that you had all the information that you needed to know. So that's about it, and I hope that you've learned something from this. Definitely subscribe if you haven't done so already, and thank you very much for watching.